I started to become a chef, not to really be a chef. It wasn't the idea. The idea first was I didn't know what I wanted to be when I was growing up completely. I knew I loved animals. I wanted to help animals, and I sort of thought about being a vet, and I that's another story. When I wanted to be a vet and what happened, it kind of led me in direction. Well, maybe not just yet. I ended up at a school in Santa Cruz because of marine mammals. I was a Save the Whales kid. So as I grew up saving pets and things, I was also I read an article about how they treat the whales in the whaling industry, and I was just appalled. So in 8th grade and 9th grade, you could see me wearing the Save the Whales t-shirt, boycott Japanese and Russian goods, because they were doing big whale hunts still. And I can't believe, though, actually, that I've been protesting this long for that alone, and they're still whaling. So that's another story. But what happened during that time of growing up, and my love for animals, from rescue pets as they came about the property, to my knowledge of how animals are treated, from whales to then it started with veal and farm animals and eating animals. And then that was kind of the drive to say, by the time I'm 18, I'm going to be an adult, and I don't have to do what my parents say or what anybody says. That was sort of going to be my defining moment, to become a vegetarian and to not consume the animals that I really loved and cared for. Also, during I was growing up, my parents were foodies. They were European immigrants, got into food service because that was just a job for them in this country, and they also, though, had a passion for it. And so everything was discussed, what we were eating and how it was prepared. And my mom loved reading whatever she could find on different food and cuisines. And back then, there weren't any magazines. She could read German, so she'd pick a German magazine, and they had recipes in these magazines. Back then, it was just Family Circle or Women's Day, and they'd have like Jello mold recipes. And my parents always thought like white bread was weird. So all these foods that my friends were eating were not something that I tried to like, because I wanted to be like everyone, but I didn't even like it. I loved the fresh food that she would make, and sauteed mushrooms, and I'd have to chop the herbs for her when I was little, go pick it in the garden. And so that was sort of normal to me. Back then, there wasn't a word, foodie wasn't a word, which actually would describe them. So my friends called me the other word that fit at the time, weirdo, because I ate these foods that were not like what everybody else was eating. And try as I may, I even took my sandwiches to school because they were not on white bread. My parents happened to find a local baker that made like rye, and the Jewish bakery that had rye bread and different kinds. So I'd have this weird kind of bread with some weird stuff inside it, and I would eat my sandwiches, so the table would be here, and I would take a bite, put it under the table, just so I didn't get ridiculed. But I wasn't going to give it up. I wasn't like defiant to say, well, this is good. And so as time went on, most of the food, what I realize now and looking back, is that the flavor really didn't come from the animals, and there wasn't a ton of it. Like it wasn't American big steak. You have a big steak to eat at lunch. It would be certain things sauteed with garlic, or, the flavors came from the vegetables. And I will still say that today, unless you're just liking this flavor of a steak, it's what the people put in garlic, salt, and all. It's coming from some kind of plant. So when I'm 18, I become a vegetarian, cooking on my own, and then I get to school in Santa Cruz. It would tie into my love for animals, for the whales and such. So I thought I'm going to study marine biology there, and biology in general. And I was blessed to meet a lady at the time who was making fresh tempeh and seitan. I rented a room from her. It's like, what is this? What's it called? Where is it from? At the same time, we're taking chemistry, and she came from the tempeh and seitan from a macrobiotic point of view. And I started reading her cookbooks, and I was taking chemistry, and it kind of made sense. And whole plant-based and all these foods, like, you want to eat enough food to give you the amount of energy, taking the least energy to digest, And so that was great for me to learn, because I can explain the protein. Like, well, you need protein. You do, but where does protein come from, So I could explain that. And then I'm still cooking, because I became a vegetarian at 18, and I had to cook for myself, and I remembering my mother's flavors and all that and incorporating it. But when I found tempeh and seitan, this light bulb really went off in my college years there. And I thought, if people could have this, like this tempeh, this could be sauteed. This is like a burger. This could be, if people had these alternatives to the textures, because at this point I thought people eat for flavor and texture. They really don't care. They don't see roadkill and get hungry and stop at McDonald's, right?
Yeah.
You see fruit trees and you go, oh, you pick cherries, like I want to do that. But really the inclination was more that people are just in a hurry, they're hungry, and they're not really thinking about where it all came from. And I'd been doing that my whole life.